All right, this week we're back with an Olympian in the podcast studio. Super excited. This chat was really insightful. We speak about mindset and how the journey is more important than the destination. We talk about overcoming injuries, and we talk about what it's like going to the Olympic Games. So make sure you stick around and like, subscribe, watch the whole thing. And I'll see you soon. We're back again. I got a cool guest. It's one from the past, and it's awesome to see yourself doing so well. Brendan Wakeling, welcome.
I've never had that before. A cool guest.
A cool guest.
I'll take that. It's been a while, and people say a long time no see, but I think maybe 2011 was the last time we maybe sat down.
I don't remember after graduation catching up, so
it's all just gone like this since then.
Since then, you've done a few things. I got my list. I just got to make sure that I capture them all. One thing I do is I get into it and I sort of forget that the guests don't know who I'm talking to. So I've just been like skipping into it. So one thing I'm trying to do is make sure everyone knows who I'm talking to. So my list of guests, I have 2017, you won gold at the Oceania Weightlifting Championships. 2018 at the Com Games. 2019 Pacific Games, won gold again, setting a new Oceania clean and jerk record. 2020, competed at the Olympics, and then 2022, you were in the Com Games again. Did I miss any key parts of the journey?
No.
No other goals, no other records in there?
I think my biggest competitions have obviously been the 2018, 2022 Commonwealth Games, and then, of course, the Olympic Games is the pinnacle.
Yeah.
I've done a couple World Championships since then, a couple other niche international events that people don't know about, but are a big deal in terms of like Eastern Europe, or weightlifting's big, but you mentioned the Olympics. That's that's the pinnacle, I guess.
I feel like I get that, and doing some research out, as you mentioned, there's some in Europe and other places, and I guess Australia being a pretty not known for its weightlifting as such. And I remember doing a bit of research on weightlifting, and I used the Google Trends, and I just remember seeing like just Eastern Europe was so, like I said, it goes in like a color scheme, and it was just like thick, and I'm just like, oh, okay, go on there, and they've got the biggest Europeans lifting. So it is cool that you sort of get the opportunity to travel the world and do that, where it's not a very Australian-based sort of sport as such. Sort of do a little bit of backstory. You started playing football. We went to Palm Beach Crumman together. We were in the track and field academy together. I still claim to fame this day. I remember you broke your arm in year 12 and we had the 100-meter sprint, and it's the only time I've ever beaten you in a race. So that sticks. Apart from that, you were just always, we're known as the fast man at school. We played footy against Tugan and you scored multiple tries. How did you sort of go from footy into weightlifting?
It was a bit of a, I guess, coincidental or weird transition into weightlifting. So obviously started rugby league, as I'm sure you did. I feel like we have similar skill sets when it comes to rugby league. We were more of the
catch and run.
Pass him the ball if he's on the wing, or just get him to run in some direction with the ball because he had speed and acceleration. I was 100%. Similar. So I played up until I was 21. After graduating high school, throughout going to university and doing things outside of sport, I was very much into the gym. Mm-hmm. So for my last couple of years playing, reserve grade, A grade, I was going to the gym, once, twice a day, 7 days a week. Just loved training at the gym. That was my passion at the time. And I had no idea what weightlifting was. Didn't know what a snatch was. Didn't know what a clean and jerk was. Someone at the gym, one of my friends there, mentioned that they were going to try this. They call it a weightlifting 101 class at a weightlifting club. Mm-hmm. Just down the road from here. It doesn't exist anymore, but Gold Coast Weightlifting Club was what it was called. And it was a free Monday night session. You go in, learn some weightlifting. If you enjoy it, then, join. And I went and tried it. My friend actually couldn't make it to that session, so I went alone. Turned out I had a bit of a knack for it, and I really enjoyed just how difficult it was. Mm-hmm. And long story short, I ended up, putting my entire life to the side so I could pursue the sport, eventually leading to the Olympics in, I guess a rather short time. 2015, roughly around the end of the year I started. And then obviously the Olympics in 2021.
Huge, quick turnaround. That was actually one of the things I was going to ask, is how was sort of, you talked about the story there and you started just doing gym for fun. How long was it till you competed in your first event? So then how long till you went to the Com Games or Olympics type thing?
I competed in my first weightlifting event after 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, okay, straight into it.
I barely knew what I was doing. I didn't sign up for the competition myself. The coach at the club signed me up and I was just like, sure. Mm-hmm. So I did the lifts, kind of. I can't even remember what I lifted, but that was good for me, just to kind of break that barrier down. A lot of people that go into weightlifting wait, and they like to say they'll compete once they're good enough or once they're, confident. And I've never found that, throughout my entire career, even competing at the Olympics. So getting in there early and just getting my feet wet kind of was what dragged me in to go, further and further into the Olympics. So I trained 5 sessions a week for the first year, ended up stopping playing rugby league, going into my first year of weightlifting. So still, training about the same amount as you would at a regular gym, but I was just doing weightlifting. Competed about 12 times in my first year. At the end of 2016, after that year, I graduated from university. I was soul searching a little bit. I felt I lacked purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have anything that I really wanted to do. I like going to the gym, but I couldn't just go to the gym every day and just make a living doing that.
Yep.
So I would think like, maybe I can start a business start a supplement line or do this or do that. And yeah, I was a bit stuck in that point in my life. So after I graduated from university, and the Commonwealth Games was on the Gold Coast 2 years after that point. So I thought I'd have a gap year after university and try to challenge myself to do something what I considered, audacious. A lot of people from the outside would have thought that, it would be impossible, but I wanted to train for 12 to 18 months, figuratively go pro. So there's no money in weightlifting. So you can't, professionally weightlift as like a sole income.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of manufactured what it would look like to be a professional weightlifter. And I lived that life for about 18 months where I trained 11 sessions a week. I would come to my gym here in Burleigh, train in the morning. I would go to a recovery centre for the afternoon, come back, train at night. So it'd pretty much be an 8 till 8 day, 5 days a week. One session on a Saturday. I obviously had to make money.
I was going to say,
weightlifting wasn't making money.
Yeah.
So I took a job as a pub janitor, 3 mornings a week. And then I would work at a bottle-o on the late weekend shift. And then just weightlifted outside of that. And then luckily enough for me, it obviously led to, making the Commonwealth Games and then, finding work outside of that so I could continue to weightlift and then eventually the Olympics. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah, 100%. That sort of stage where, as you said, you jumped in, you said you had a job, because I was like, where does he find time to work during all this? How long, you said sort of 18 months was like you knuckled down, you went for that. Like how long until you sort of got named? Like when were the Olympic trials? When did you sort of know that, I might be able to sort of make some money, or I might be able to be pretty good at this? Obviously you're pretty good, but how long was the journey before you like sort of saw some light?
So when I started that journey where I was training full time, my best lifts at the time were a 90 kilo snatch, maybe 130 kilo clean and jerk.
Mm-hmm. In reference, what would a like Olympic qualifying weight be for someone who doesn't know?
So by the end of my time of doing that process, my best snatch was 128 and best clean and jerk was 165 back in 2018.
Like 40 kilos nearly. Oh.
Since then, I've upped it a bit. Since then, 175 clean and jerk, 130 snatch. Still by no means the top level at the Olympics, but obviously enough to make it into that echelon.
Yep.
So I was at a point where I was certainly not a shoo-in to make the Commonwealth Games when I decided to do it. Mm-hmm. But making that decision to figuratively go pro, I obviously increased my numbers very quickly over that year, and I was putting a lot of time into it. It was essentially all I did. I didn't see friends. I didn't hear from friends. I didn't open a Snapchat from anyone. I didn't even consider it. I was just weightlifting, and that was it. If anything, probably too consumed by it. Mm-hmm. So after the Commonwealth Games, I had somewhat gotten to that tipping point, like that point of diminishing returns where I was putting too much into weightlifting and I had burnt out. So setting really high expectations for myself. When I would meet an expectation, I would just pick something else, keep chasing the rainbow, the main goal initially was to make the Commonwealth Games. I had done that and I had a fair idea I was going to make it 3/4 through that year. And I just upped it to, I'm going to win the event. Didn't quite get there. Took it very hard afterwards. Did a lot of self-reflecting after that and somewhat changed my strategy in the way that I structured my life. So I went from 11 sessions a week back down to 5 to 6 sessions a week afterwards, and found that balance alongside doing, work on the side was a lot better in terms of, my trajectory. I lifted a lot more training 5 to 6 sessions a week than I was
Just
going all
smashing
in.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You sort of mentioned how you would have a bar, you'd reach it and you'd go again, and you sort of tried to change that. You talked about dropping down your sessions, but was there sort of, how did you sort of come to that? Were you just feeling down after? You're like, oh, I keep just raising it. Like, how did you sort of, what was your mindset like when you sort of were like, I guess, new question, like, what's your mindset now rather than, oh, keep going? Are you happy? I spoke about on the podcast a little bit more so enjoying the journey, not the destination. Is that more your outlook now?
Yeah, I was very destination focused back then. I disregarded the journey. Any small win or win I had at all during that period, I would disregard it. As the Conor McGregor line was, if you sleep on a win, you wake up with a loss. That was how I treated that whole year. So there was no real fun. There was no real moments where I was happy with my progress. I was just looking way beyond at this point that I was shooting for.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't following this, linear trajectory of, hitting X amount by this time, then I would just beat myself up. And it took competing at my first Commonwealth Games, I come 7th, underperformed by a lot. So I only lifted 2 out of 6 of my lifts on the platform, which were a reflection of what I was lifting in training at the time. But I thought I had to, supersede that and be some superhero on the platform that could, do the unthinkable and rise to the occasion. And it wasn't until that fall that I realized that the actual outcome itself, win or lose, it didn't matter at all. My family didn't even know how weightlifting even worked.
They were just happy to see you there.
Friends and family that were there watching.
I remember watching it live.
Yeah. There were people that didn't even know if I had won or not. Even if I had won, they wouldn't know. But just because weightlifting is a niche sport, not everyone knows how it works.
Yeah. And
that's what made me realize that the actual, winning a medal or doing the thing at the end doesn't really matter all that much at all in the grand scheme of things. Short term, you can have fluctuations in how you emotionally feel about it. But now, if I had won, if I had lost that event, it literally wouldn't change anything right now.
It's a cool mindset to have, because I think in business and sport, it's probably 2 key areas where it's always, all right, cool, I made this much money or I won this event. What's next? And we sort of forget to reflect. So I guess what year was it, 2018 Com Games, you sort of come to that, and obviously it's come a long way since then. So it's good that you sort of were able to have that realization. Saying on the Commonwealth Games, what was it like? I guess I haven't really spoken to anyone who's been able to compete at that level. What were the highlights, lowlights? What surprised you? Was it cool? Did you see anyone who you'd like, oh my God, that's such and such standing over there? What was that like?
Weightlifting's a weird sport. As we said earlier, there's not much weightlifting in Australia. It's not a big sport. I'm used to lifting in, venues where it's just, mum in the crowd and maybe 4 other people. So to go from, extremely small venues to a stadium with 5,000 people where there's, lights shining on you, big heartbeat monitor in the background as you're approaching the bar to create suspense.
Yeah.
There's not too many sports like it where the sport revolves around one lifter on the platform with nobody else and you're front facing the crowd. So even like obviously playing rugby league, we have positions and teammates on the field, or even say gymnastics. There are other gymnastic events happening in the hall at the same time, where weightlifting, it's just all eyes are on you. All you can see in front of you is just a timer of how long you've got with the weight on the bar. Sometimes you can't even really see the crowd because the spotlight is so bright on you. And yeah, you have 1 minute to make it happen. So that was surreal to go from no crowd to what I would consider all the crowd.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not like a big stadium event with, tens of thousands of people, but to me, it was a lot. But now that I've done, like the Olympics, the World Championships, they're all just the same event, just dressed a little differently. So I get just as nervous to lift locally as I do at a stadium or theatre filled event. It's the same thing, really.
Yeah. Do you see, while you're in that environment, do you get to hang out with the other athletes? Is it sort of segregated because you got your events on, or like when you have the opening ceremony, you get to sort of, rub shoulders, you learn of anyone while you're there?
At the Olympic Games, it was a little different due to COVID. So for our opening ceremony, it was very much, bus drops you off, you walk down the middle of the empty stadium, then it's back on the bus and then back to the village. Although when we were in the village, it was everyone all together. So it was essentially everyone rubbing shoulders. But because you have an event in mind coming up, you're more so focused on that event. So I'm trying to limit how much walking I'm doing. I'm limiting how much I'm eating because I have to make weight. So I'm not exactly venturing out. I'm not going sightseeing. It's always focused on the event.
Yeah.
And we left within 24 hours of competing. So I did get to see some interesting people. So I walked shoulder to shoulder, or not shoulder to hip with Yao Ming, for example.
Yeah, wow.
He was walking around. A lot of different body types from different sports. It's very interesting to see everyone in this melting pot, and just to see how different all the elite athletes in the world are all together. But not in particular, I didn't learn anything at the event.
Yep.
It's more so within teams and just content in general that I consumed in the lead up. I'm definitely I would say an introvert or a quiet person. So when it comes to my training, I train for the most part just in my garage at home. So I did 95% of my training at home for the Olympics.
So you mentioned there you were consuming content, and I messaged you the other day because anyone who doesn't follow Brandy does a post every day, and you highlighted that. How'd you get on that train? How was that something you sort of come to, like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna do a post every day, and where do you get sort of inspiration for your posts?
So through weightlifting, obviously growing up, competing in sport, I took it seriously, but nowhere near as seriously as I did when I did weightlifting. So with rugby league, training twice a week, playing on the weekend.
Yeah.
And then when I started weightlifting and realized the power of consistency. So firstly, what people, I think, romanticize the process a bit and forget to work hard and the value in work ethic. So after working hard up to a certain point, the value of momentum and consistency is what seems to distinguish those that do make that top level and those that don't. So once I realized that with weightlifting, through just training day after day and starting to build that momentum, I tried to apply it to other areas in life. And I had played around with social media content to try to grow some kind of a brand. Maybe a year ago, I tried different kinds of ways to record content, and I was posting semi-regularly. And just like that figurative term of going pro, I thought I'm not really taking it serious. If I'm not posting every single day, I'm just kind of saying that I'm taking this seriously, and I'm not really taking it seriously. So I thought, step one, I need to get my foot in the door and post every single day. I've had a few times in my life where I've created these weird habits, like I would always forget to train my abdominals after weightlifting just from being lazy, getting your stuff going home. So I started doing that every day, and I did that myself and my partner. We did it for just shy of 1,600 days in a row.
So I remember seeing that post and you had abs every day. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it was so many.
Yeah,
Wow.
the hashtag abs every day.
Yeah.
But there was a spillover effect from that, from having that consistency of doing that into other areas in my life. So I thought, why not start doing it with content? And when I started doing it, I don't have a huge following, but I went, 5x'd my following in a few months of doing that. And because I'm doing more things within the realm of, fitness coaching, online coaching, I just put out something that I would have considered valuable when I started weightlifting and just do it every day. I've done a lot of snatch and clean and jerks and work with like the top coaches in the country. So if I can't think of one tip every single day to put out there, then I may not know as much as I think I do.
That's fair. That's a good way to put it. I remember I did about a month ago. I sort of went down the same path and tried to do a post every day. I made it. I think I made it 50 days, and then I sort of just got complacent. And I've done enough, and I told I have a friend, and I said next month, because I'm very have a bit of Instagram. That's usually my main sort of social media, and I just don't use TikTok because I'm not on it, and I don't want to be on it because it consumes me every single minute of the day. So I don't go on it to avoid it. But then because I'm not on it, I don't post. So next month I'm doing for 30 days. I'm gonna do a post on TikTok because the organic reach on there is wild. Do you do TikTok as well? Both?
Yeah, so TikTok was the first platform that I took more seriously than Instagram. So I had an Instagram and I would just post my lifts, and that wouldn't really grow my page because I'm not really delivering value. I'm just posting myself lifting weights. No matter how heavy it is, it's not really delivering value. So I thought I would start from scratch on TikTok and just kind of play around with it. So I offered free lift technical reviews on TikTok. So whoever was on their weightlifting, tag me in the lift, and then I would record myself critiquing their lift. And I did maybe 100 or so of those, and that kind of got it started.
Yep.
But that was very time intensive for a post that didn't gain a lot of engagement. I was creating goodwill within the community on TikTok, but now that I'm, I guess, gaming the system a little more and working towards engagement and trying to grow my personal brand, it's shifted somewhat to be more efficient. But TikTok was my first, foot in the door.
How many followers do you have on TikTok now?
Not that many, only a couple thousand.
Yeah, okay.
And then I transitioned back to Instagram, and my Instagram is much bigger than my TikTok.
Instagram's pretty good.
I do want to get back into TikTok, but yeah, I just need to get started with that streak again. It's all about just, putting one foot before the other.
Once you get a few days in, you're like, I can't break it now. I've come so far.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, we spoke about before how weightlifting doesn't have a big money. You can't really go pro in Australia as such. And you talk about building your personal brand. You now do weightlifting coaching, and you talk about doing 100, goodwill posts. How have you sort of transitioned from obviously still competing, but transition to that coaching and building your personal brand to be able to provide a revenue for yourself so you can still compete?
So I had this idea that I was going to delve more into the business side of weightlifting after I competed at the Olympic Games. So I had that in my head, before I even did my first Commonwealth Games. So I knew that the time was coming. But while I was so focused on being an elite athlete, I had trained with other Olympians that didn't have any personal brand or social media. And one of them said one day that they just want to be about it, not talk about it. And that resonated with me for so long, where I would purposely not, be so out there with posting and making claims and doing all this. And I was just doing the work. But then after a while, especially nowadays, if you want to have, a personal brand to leverage, you need to be active on social media. Yeah. So if I had my time again, I would be more active in that sense. But I also didn't have the credentials, the knowledge, or the experience to really leverage for any kind of business. So I decided while I was in quarantine after the Olympics. So I competed at the Olympics. Within 24 hours, I was sent to quarantine in Sydney. I thought I was going to have 2 weeks of quarantine where I was purposely going to shut off, not do anything productive because I'd just been, training so hard to get to the Olympics. I had a lot of injuries leading up that I'd overcome to get there. It took a big emotional and mental toll on me to overcome and get it. And I was very happy with my performance there and thought that I could just, relax for 2 weeks in the hotel room. And I did for about 7 days. And through the halfway point, I just had an urge that I had to get started with something productive.
Yeah.
So that's when I started, templating programs, creating a bit of a path as to how it would look if I started with weightlifting coaching. And I somewhat picked it up after that, picked up a few clients after the Olympics, and then I've slowly built on that as time went on. So that was my foot in the door.
Yep.
I would still say I'm in my infancy when it comes to building a business. In weightlifting.
What are some of the bigger lessons or the biggest barriers you've had to face so far? If anyone who wants to sort of get started and follow a similar model, what's been the hardest for you?
I think just the general transition from being an athlete to deviating outside of that. But I think it's a blessing and a curse. So if weightlifting paid a lot of money, in the long run, I feel like that would be worse for me. I think the best thing was that I followed a path that had no money and I was doing it for the love of it. So even if it didn't pay money, I'll probably still be doing some kind of, help within weightlifting.
Yep.
After I'd transitioned, social media was a big one, how to make a personal brand for myself, trying to overcome limiting beliefs and the fear of putting myself out there to be judged was a big one that I had to overcome. I didn't really back myself in that regard, and I didn't know really where to start. But just essentially falling forward was the best way for me to do it. So I have so many cringeworthy videos of me, doing face to camera stuff, other little skits here and there when I started just to play around with it.
Yeah.
But I think if you don't cringe at your content, 6 months ago, then you're
better,
probably
are you?
not. Yeah.
Yeah, I had something the other day, and I don't know who I was talking to. I think it was my fiance, and we're talking about something similar, and I was reflecting back, and I'm like, how did I think that at the time? Like, why was I thinking that? And she's like, it's probably good that you're thinking differently because it actually means you're learning from, otherwise you'd keep doing the same thing. And I was like, thanks for making me feel a little bit better. What have you found has been worked well? And obviously it can be within the social media, like what types of posts are working well, like what sort of helps generate more engagement? What are your best performing types of posts?
So I've somewhat segmented it. So I have more of like a general top of funnel post. So all reels currently, every now and again I'll do a post, but reels tend to do the best on Instagram. Every third day or so I'll post a meme. So as much as the memes, I use them for the most part to not take myself so seriously. So I make something funny within the realm of barbell sports. So I purposely try to make it somewhat more general so it can apply to weightlifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding, CrossFit. And I'll put a reel out there and that can do upwards of 2 million views, I think, is the most. But those followers aren't exactly ones that are going to then end up being, clients of mine.
Yeah.
So very top of funnel stuff. And in between that, I'll sandwich with just general weightlifting tips. Typically B-roll videos with myself, speaking over the background about tips about, staying over the bar in the first pull of the snatch or some other small technical aspect.
Yep.
Or something to do with, the mental aspect of being a weightlifter or something a bit more nuanced that I've learned through experiencing, competing at the top level. So that's the majority of my content. And every now and again, I'll have a call to action every 20 or so posts, but that's kind of what I'm running with at the moment.
Yeah.
Every now and again, I'll try something a bit different, but I'm trying to be more efficient and trying to make it easier for myself. So when I first started, I would, get the camera out, sit in front of the camera. I would edit it for, over an hour, add little clips and bites here and there. And the time that it took to get little engagement, it just wasn't moving the needle. So I had to be more efficient and just generally make things easier for myself. I think people try to make things harder for themselves on purpose because it makes them feel like they're doing the right thing. But it doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah. I think I have similar story, and when I was doing like my 30 days, I had one. I didn't want to post it. I didn't post it for 3-4 days. I'm like, this sucks. But I just recorded it. I had nothing. I was being lazy. I'm posting it. I don't care. Just going through that judgment. Everyone's saying the head. It was my best performing post. It was one of those green screen ones. I didn't chuck my own captions. It was just boom, Instagram captions, and it went for my top performing post. I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. I posted one the next day. It was one of the ones that it took, an hour or two to edit together and clip together. Just bombed out. And it's just so wild how, something thinking you do really well, but they don't at all. So I think one of the key things you said there was just I think it was fall forward. So, you don't know if you don't try. So making sure you put yourself out there, and you just never know what's going to come of it. We spoke briefly before that you're just coming back from injuries, had a few, I wouldn't say devastating, but just real setbacks in your career. How have you sort of gone through that? Do you are you a meditator, are you a visualizer? What are sort of the processes to help you overcome those and just keep moving forward?
I would say that each injury, simply just through experience, I don't know if easier is the right word, but I've gotten through them through prior experience. So my first injury was a bursitis issue in my hip after my first Commonwealth Games. And essentially every time I would squat, I would have a sharp pain in my hip. And that lasted roughly 10 months, completely drained all of my strength. Once I'd gotten it better, I had to build myself up again. I did for about 6 months. Then the other hip went. Then that was 10 months again. And through each little injury, because I had identified myself so much with being an elite weightlifter, I felt like I was missing a huge piece of myself when I wasn't training as much as I would, or competing at the top level, or not even lifting to what I believe I should have been. So I took them to heart a lot when they first happened. And it was a scary feeling to know that it could end tomorrow and I would have nothing. I would have no idea what I was going to do at that point. After those 2 injuries, I had my knee injury. So it was generally just training on a cartilage issue for 3 years leading up to the Olympics. So I've had 2 arthroscopies on that knee to try to clear it out so I could lift without, my knee swelling up. Those ones I took to heart as well. And another one, 3 months before the Olympics, I squashed my middle finger under a heavyweight, which needed emergency plastic surgery. So I had to heal that up without any lifting for half that training cycle.
Yeah, wow.
It was through each of these setbacks which further made me expand and look beyond being an athlete. I don't think it's healthy for someone just to be so narrow focused on being an athlete and that's it, because it's such a small slice of the pie when it comes to your life. And you don't need to delegate all the time in the world to being an athlete. There's only, in the context of weightlifting, there's only so much you can do in the gym. And then you should be leveraging what you're doing to then move beyond that afterwards. So each time I would get injured, I felt like it was stripping away a piece of that identity of being an elite athlete, to now, having gone through all that and doing more stuff outside of weightlifting with coaching and business, whatnot, now that I'm starting to ramp back up into training, my last surgery was 13 weeks ago. So I'm just kind of building back up, hopefully to compete at the next Commonwealth Games. But I don't want to identify too much with what will happen at that event. So whether I win, whether I lose, I'm quite content, especially now that I've got more things happening. I have a family, I have a business, and that is definitely a more positive and healthy mindset to be in, I found.
The way you talk about mindset's really interesting, and you talk about it really well, and you're very clear and concise. Where have you because you obviously spoke about how you're just so athlete focused, also destination focused. How did you sort of get the skills and the mindset to be in love with the journey or to overcome the setbacks? Were your books, podcasts, what are you listening to? What are you reading? How do you sort of come to that?
Partly just through experience and feeling really low and lost at times made me really think about where I was going to go in the future, but also obviously content. So podcasts, books. I mean, I've read countless books on the topic or podcasts. I've heard you talk about Hormozy on the podcast. I've read his books, listened to the podcast. Modern Wisdom's another one I'm listening to at the moment. I can go deep into that sometimes, but then also I feel like I get too deep into it and I need to lighten the mood. So I'll listen to a comedy podcast or something. I feel like I somewhat am on a pendulum where I can get really deep into my thoughts about how I'm feeling about something.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I get too deep and then I'm taking things too serious and I need to just live in the moment and be more present.
Yeah.
So I would say more just experience, I think.
Yeah, cool. I'm very similar. Not so much, definitely mindset as well, where I'll go Modern Wisdom train and I'll just smash heaps of those for a week. And I'm biggest Chris Williamson fan now. And then next week I'm on a bit of Hormozy today. And it's interesting how you sort of variation. And I guess even listening to the same things, sometimes you get different messages or you listen to different people and you take different things from it. So it's cool to have a bit of variety. You mentioned a few podcasts, any key books, whether mindset, business, anything that you like there, your go-tos?
My biggest one when I was full athlete mode through when I was training, and that's all I was doing. I liked Relentless by Tim Grover. I think his name is the coach of
MJ, Michael
Jordan's coach. I really like that one. I think these days, because I try to be a bit more grounded and not be so focused on being an athlete, it doesn't resonate with me as well these days. But if you're just wanting something that gives you like a burst of energy, I
Proper.
would read that book.
Yeah. I listened to it just on that. I listened to it, the audio book version. I listened to another one. I think it was Founders. So they sort of talk about different founders. And then they would talk as a Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan one at the start. Like, if you haven't listened to this podcast, go listen to this one first. So I went to listen to Relentless. And within like the first chapter, I'm like, I'm worthless. He's like going in about, what does he call it? He's like, all those number one, the cleaners. Yeah. He's going on about that. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, do I have those qualities? Like, am I good enough to be a cleaner? Then some of them I'm just like, I'm not. Those other ones he's referring to, but it is a very relentless book. I think it's a great title for it. Any other ones? I'd cut you off there. Do you have any other?
I take more inspiration from anyone in their particular field that really dedicates themselves to their craft. So it could be someone that does Rubik's Cube and does it so religiously that they know every single aspect of it and they can solve it just like that.
Yeah.
Just watching people in their certain niche that are just so onto it, I find particularly inspiring.
Yeah.
When it comes to mindset, these days, a lot of it has actually come through me doing my own podcast. So I would pick a topic and I would talk about it on my own for 10 to 15 minutes about a certain topic. And that helped me kind of extrapolate all my thoughts because I would rewrite, 1,000 or 2,000 words before each episode.
Yeah.
And it would help me extract my thoughts instead of just, speaking like this without any notes prior. When you write things down, you can really, your thoughts can come more concrete. I feel like that has been a big one for me. So I've done 75, 80 episodes. I haven't done one in a couple months now that I'm quite busy with other aspects of business and training. But that was a big practice for me, just writing down on a certain topic. I've done a topic on probably pretty much everything in weightlifting.
Yeah.
Whether it was about, mindset, being process orientated, or just, I guess, talking about my experience in general. That's probably been the biggest one for me personally. It's helped me think for myself a bit more as well and not get too tied to whatever I'm listening to at the time. I think a lot of people struggle to think for themselves these days, especially with all the content, the fire hydrant of content and catchy words, to be able to sit in a room on your own and be able to figure out what you value without anyone else's projection of their own values, I feel like is important to have.
That was preach. That was good. I 100% agree with you. I think Matt Sharma came on the other day and he spoke about his morning routine. I think it was called Savers, and I forget most of them. One of them was S and was Scribe, and I have a bit of a process in the morning where I just brain dump in the morning of anything that's in my head, and I just, as you said, you start to write and you get clarity, and you like one thought leads to another, and I remember at school being English and I hated writing, and I'm like, anything, just not picking up a pen, please, no. And now I love it. Like, I'd rather sort of just sit there and write. If I'm taking notes or research, I love just writing rather than sort of typing. Sometimes I love typing. It's faster. There's processes and neater and whatnot. But just the power of just getting all your thoughts out and just relieving, I think it is definitely an underrated probably skill, hobby, whatever you want to call it, process.
Yeah, I don't know what you would call it. I guess it's in a sense like journaling, right? I've never been one to journal, but that was like an inadvertent way for me to do it through writing and speaking. And it would have been something like I was definitely not someone that was great at English in school. As you said, picking up a pen to write something was, I'd rather do anything else. I'd rather be doing our track and field sport excellence class than that. But
getting smacked by Wendy Wise, just making us do laps, 100%. Do you have any mentors? Like, you speak about the podcast and that. Have you had any mentors that you've worked that make a difference? And if so, what have they taught you, and what elements of your life has it been?
There's been a couple indirect mentors. So firstly, through the content, as we were just speaking. So you say like the Modern Wisdom podcast, for instance, like depending on who the guest is, what the topic is, I find those quite thought-provoking and helpful depending on the context of the episode. There's been a few athletes that I have worked with, whether through work, say through Deadly Choices, where I work as an ambassador, the likes of Petro Sevenasiva, Preston Campbell. They are very grounded individuals. So to see people that are so grounded beyond just sporting, I'd found that quite motivating. And in terms of things that help me, say, level up, just people that instilled belief in me when I didn't have it. So, for instance, Selwyn Apanui, who was my rugby league coach from 14 to 21, like when he put me in my first A grade game, so I was 19 at the time, and he had called me up to play an odd game against Burleigh Bears, I think it was. And I was like, why are you asking me out of everyone? I'll get killed if I go on the field.
Yeah.
And I was dreading it for the weeks leading up to it. But then I played just like I would at any other game of football, and I was fine. It's just those moments where you kind of get that little kick over the edge. So for me, I thought that was a brick wall for me. I can't go beyond that. I'm not good enough to do that.
Yeah.
Going into working for Deadly Choices some years later, Selwyn was involved in that company as well. And he gave me the kick to go do some public speaking events for them. So that was another example where I didn't think that I belonged to go speak about apparently I had a story to tell. So to go speak about my story in a school. So to go there and do that and then come out the other end and be like, oh, I'm fine. And just people that had belief in me when I didn't. So my parents thought I was going to make the Commonwealth Games when I first announced that I was going to try. They were like, oh, cool. So where do we get tickets? That's 18 months prior. And I'm like, now I really got to make it.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think myself as well, my mum has been the biggest supporter of me ever. Like doing the podcast, and every time I finish podcast, that was the best one ever, every single time. And I'm just like, yes, like just a little boost. And she's always been so positive. I think it's such a, I wouldn't say underrated, probably underrated when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I've definitely appreciate the more, and you don't realize how much your parents do for you when you're younger. Well, I didn't anyway. And then you get older, and that support's just still there. And it's definitely a privilege to have supporting parents who want you to get you where you need to go. You talk about a bit of work with Deadly Choices. You talk about the mentors you've had. What do you like as a mentee? What are you trying to tell this future generation when you go on there, you're speaking, you're being an ambassador? What's your key messages?
My key message now is more so just to live authentically and not fall, prey to peer pressure or just conforming to social norms. So when I was a kid, when I was 5, 6 years old, I just wanted to go to the Olympics. Not for weightlifting, it was for long jump. And that was an idea that no one had given me. That was just through me watching the TV, really wanting to be there. For Christmas, I would get a long jump pit dug in the backyard, as that was the weird kid I was back then. I was following a path that authentically I wanted to go down. And then as you get older, typically as you go through high school, there's a lot more social side to it, a lot more peer pressure and expectation. And I deviated off that path somewhat. So I was doing sport, I was doing this and that. I went to university, but I was more so just doing it because that was just the general path that everyone did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started doing things like trying to make the Commonwealth Games or the Olympics where I started to get back on track and do things that were aligning to what I truly wanted to do. So saying no to things outside of that weren't, aligning with my values. So I would say trusting your instinct and doing things regardless of what people think you should be doing is probably the best way that you could live.
It's a good message to be spreading. I do remember you. I forgot you did long jump. I thought that was your event. I just remember you the 100, but yeah, you used to smash at long jump as well.
Because we didn't have anyone at the school that taught long jump. So our teacher who was a sprinter, was like, come do the 100-meter sprint.
Welcome.
I'm better at this event.
That's true. What does it look like now moving forward for you? Like obviously your surgery, knees starting to get better. What's the future hold?
So the 2026 Commonwealth Games, whether that is on or not, we don't even know. Is
that the Brisbane?
That was the one that was supposed to be in Victoria.
Yep.
And then they don't have a venue for it.
They still have a venue.
Not that I know of. So that's the event that I'm training for. Whether I compete at that one or not, it's up in the air. So I'm training towards that, but I'm just enjoying training for the sake of training without anything in mind currently, and trying to build something within weightlifting to help as many people as I can around the world. So I coach people directly directly and indirectly through one-to-one, or I have a team program where I have people across 6 different countries. So trying to expand on that and see how I can help as many people at scale as I can. So still kind of figuring my way out as I'm going along,
Aren't we all?
falling forward, as they say. So
Yeah.
who knows what my answer to this will be in another 5 years or so.
We'll get you another 5 years to find out. Firstly, I want to say just thank you for coming on. Like, as you said, your story being Commonwealth Games Olympian, and you've given such an insight into your mindset. I leave with one final question. You sort of answered it, maybe not. What would you put on a billboard? If you had a billboard for everyone that drive past, everyone in the world's going to drive past this billboard, what are you going to put on there?
As in like a picture or a message?
Could be a picture or a message, like a quote or something like that. Something you might tell to your younger Brandon.
You do you.
I like that. That is the episode for today. As I said, thank you for coming on. Such a good chat. We wish you all the best. Where can anyone go to find you if they want some expert weightlifting tips or just want to follow your journey?
If you look up Brandon Wakeling on Instagram, I'm not sure if it's Brandon_Wakeling, but there's not too many Brandon Wakelings out there. So if you look that up and see a little profile photo of me with the Olympics in the background, that's probably me. So
Probably, unless someone's, making a fake account.
maybe.
Maybe. All right, thank you again. And thank you for watching. Before I go, just a little shout out. Man City, 4 in a row. First team to ever do it. Sad to wear the shirt today, but thank you for watching and we'll see you next time.